We discussed trends that would disrupt the industry over the next 5 to 10 years. I think the pharma community overall is at a 3 out of 10 of AI adoption. Will it take out the underlying premise that expertise and experience can help solve problems? Absolutely not.
Onyx Live is proudly sponsored by Humphreys Law and Panacea.
Thank you for today and for the opportunity to speak. Max Baumann, partner at Treehill Partners, background in corporate finance, investment banking from UBS and Blackstone, and running Treehill Partners since 2014, which I founded with Ali Shahzadeh, co-founder of Tree.
Fantastic. So we sat down with Ali over the past 2 days to reflect on some of the Treehill sessions. And so how did today go in terms of your talks?
So today was the final event in our roundtables. We were framing them to have a red line from the Sunday and Monday sessions, which really focused on a triangle between biotech and what they're concerned with in their development operations, the funders of these efforts, and the large pharma community as the buyers and ultimate takers of these efforts. We then focused on what do emerging trends comprise, including in particular China and Asian players. How do they disrupt what's currently out there? We then had 2 sessions on the biggest cost blocks in biotech development, comprising clinical research and manufacturing from the provider side. And today we're trying to take all that together, including the insights and clues that the participants of our roundtables would have gotten during their attendance of the JPM week, and make a cohesive session around that. We discussed trends that would disrupt the industry over the next 5 to 10 years. We discussed how we all think the financing environment's going to evolve. And we also discussed very much what drug development by the biotech will mean in 5 or 10 years to come.
A lot of really, really interesting topics there. What were some of the most striking insights from today?
I think the most striking insights was that despite a week of JPM conference week, we're still thinking in scenarios, and it's very hard to hone in on one scenario that we're very convinced of and on others that we're prepared to reject. So we can think of how the work split between biotech and pharma will emerge. We can form a view around how biotech will optimize itself to remain relevant in the context of large pharma applying AI internally to do parts of what biotech is doing today, in the context of knowing that we have a large pool of talent across the globe in terms of science and innovation, and that this talent will also build new biotechs, which will start off as AI native companies. It's very hard to then say large pharma will, just by doing AI, take out biotech out of the equation. Maybe it's the other way around. Will biotech find ways to go commercial themselves and find products and develop products because they're able to de-risk them so much better? And will they be able to find their ways to the market? All those are controversial theses, and it's very hard to place a safe bet. So we're back into what investors in the pharma community need to do. So they need to bet on various different things and see that on a probability-weighted basis, we're well off.
So what do you anticipate is the most likely scenario? How do you think pharma and biotech are likely to interact over the next 12 to 24 months?
So the most likely scenario of extending the time frame a little bit over the next 5 years is that large organizations will remain sticky. So if we think of adoption of trends, adoption of AI, I think the pharma community overall is at a 3 out of 10 of AI adoption during daily workflows, and that includes early stage R&D. That also includes assessing R&D if we're buyers of that or licensors of that. But it also includes very much pharma's commercial processes. All of those will be tech-enabled at some point, but the time of getting there as an organization, as a large organization, we're talking about very large organizations in the context of kind of top 30 pharma, that will take time and is not going to come from overnight, basically. However, at the same time, in much smaller contexts, albeit in aggregate, these being a very large part of the pharma and biotech market, we'll see step change happening in 2026, 27 that will enable particular biotech players to leapfrog others and to get into situations and discussions with the pharmaceutical market and the pharmaceutical players there in a much different way than what we see.
So at these roundtable sessions this week, who have been the main attendees?
We've had attendees from across all industry constituents. We've had buy-side and corporate strategy from large pharma. We've had venture and private equity investors. We've had biotech, C-suite, product development, corporate development, and all that from Europe, US, and Asia. So it's been literally across constituents, including a few key providers from the manufacturing side, from the clinical research side. And the discussions we've had were usually focused on where's the intersect between those various different constituents? Where do we align, and how do we add to each other's perspectives? I think most of the discussions have not actually been controversial. They've been additive to each other. And we were coming to views on the various topics we were discussing. We were coming to reasonably cohesive views. However, again, to the scenario view of the future, as in today's session, we're really discussing long-term outlook. We were aligned that we can't all agree on one scenario to be the truth, and everything else is not, and life is not like.
Absolutely. And do you find that in your capacity as partners and advisors, is it more so the case that your clients come into you in these discussions with problems that you're able to solve, or do you feel like you're learning more so from them and understanding how the market is moving in 2026 from hearing their concerns?
We learn every day from our clients, from our prospective clients, and from companies we're dealing with as part of transactional assignments in particular. We also learn from the medical community as we're out there working, helping prove clinical studies. It's a back and forth dialogue between us and the outside world. I really appreciate these sessions for us as a key source of insight, but I do think the entire conference also does it's very good support in that regard. And obviously it's not the only conference in the year, but it's a key inflection point during the year where just a lot of meetings happen in parallel and next to each other, and it's a huge pool of overall advancement where people get up to speed on what's happened elsewhere and also align on what they foresee upcoming in the next coming quarters.
So now that you've had a chance to reflect on all of the week's discussions, what do you envisage some of the largest challenges being for biotechs this year?
I do think funding will remain a large challenge, and we've heard cues that the market's going to open up, and we had various participants in our discussions who had the personal experience that all of a sudden doors are seeming to open. I think from an industry perspective, that may apply to the better positioned companies, but we still have a rump of companies in our industry who have not evolved as it would have been required. And for those, it will continue to remain challenging. Now, on average, that means that as an investor who's trying to deploy money in the sector, they'll still be confronted with value propositions that are uninvestable as a mix of those, in a mix with those that are investable. And the efforts required to go through that will still mean that for those who are fundable, they first need to stand out from those that are unfundable, and then they need to outcompete all the others that are fundable. So which aggravates the challenge to ultimately raise capital.
Are there any, this is really the billion-dollar question, any emerging positive trends that you can see that point towards this modality, this therapeutic, this method of approaching problems is really the secret sauce that's going to allow biotech to thrive?
I don't think there's one secret sauce or recipe that applies across. I do think that what we've been heavily focusing on is optimizing the product development journey, taking out risk from that journey in the context where the returns come down with smaller target markets, more segmented markets, more competition. In that context, you need to take out the risk. And AI, we think, on the one hand, and on the other hand, some increasing appreciation by early stage companies to really focus on commercially relevant markets to target. That combination and an ability to once I know that I need to be commercially relevant, I then have tools to hand to figure out how I become that. That combination does actually help companies to become much more effective and efficient. And overall, as we're looking through the wave of assets out there, we do think that over the next 12, 18 months, those companies internally will apply some very high degree of rigor to make prioritization decisions. That then will help attract funding.
I discussed with Ali the concept or rather the problem of how an advisory firm adapts and stays relevant in a world dominated increasingly by AI, and where, days and weeks of manpower gets compressed into hours. It's at the fingertips of your clients. So from what you've heard this week, how do you see Treehill evolving in 2026?
I think since we've been, we founded the firm in 2014, we've evolved ourselves, not on an annual basis, as in every year, but almost constantly. So in any given point in time, we'd look at the future and think through whether what of the past will remain relevant, what else do we need to do. And part of it's very opportunistic, part of it is very bespoke and long-term. So are we thinking that focusing on commercially relevant, commercially effective product development will remain core? Absolutely. Is the structuring of bespoke transactions going to remain relevant? Absolutely. Do we think deploying expertise, senior expertise and capabilities into situations, making them exactly relevant to the problem at hand, is that going to remain relevant? Absolutely. Will we all benefit from lower friction, from higher efficiency by the use of AI on the research side, on the data gathering side, on all of these sides where we're doing general kind of office jobs? In that context, yes, absolutely. But will it take out the underlying premise that expertise and experience can help solve problems? Absolutely not. And that's where we play.
We're both heading to Korea night shortly. And so could you talk for a moment on the relevance of Korea as a geography to the biotech scene? It's certainly a locality that not many speak about compared to the US and compared to China. What's all the buzz about?
We've identified Korea many years ago as a key source globally for groundbreaking innovation and for very, very, very good science. We've spent humongous time in the market locally, establishing a relationship with various players and really understanding what they're doing on the scientific side and how they're moving that forward. We do see there's huge untapped potential for driving those assets even further and towards the commercial stage. There is some learning, as with any geography and with any biotech segment, be that Europe, US, Asian geographies, that we focus what we're doing in the development on commercially unmet needs and commercially relevant targets as opposed to scientific excellence. However, that gap is closing and that notion is being more and more appreciated. We do think also Korea is ahead of a step change that will transform the biotech community there. China has run ahead in transforming the biotech community there from a Me Too fast follower to a cutting edge level of science and quality in all aspects. We think quality in Korea has never been a question in any way. Scientific excellence and purity has never been a question. It's always been top notch. Now with these ingredients, there's huge promise for new products coming out of that geography, for new science finding its way to patients, and we're excited to be part of that.
And in a couple of sentences, if you had one main message for biotech CEOs this JPM, what would it be?
That would be too late at this point, I guess. But coming from this conference, I think for 2026, we should all be ready for action taking place as opposed to for postulating of what the action could be. So companies are best positioned if they already have their action planned, if they've thought through their prioritizations, if they've thought through their situation and have scenarios at hand and playbooks for each, navigating them or helping them navigate through the next quarters. I think the unprepared will find it very hard to remain relevant.
Fantastic, Max. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.